And then we sort of thought, oh, well, I could talk about my health, and then I could talk a bit about being in the band. So we got this whole sort of idea of just making it a bit more personal. And I think the idea is, so there's no explicit teachings right now regards how to, work with the faculties in any given situation. But I'm going to talk probably quite personally about how I've worked with the Five Spiritual Faculties. And I'm going to sort of, they'll be in sort of broad groups. And they're going to sort of cover like periods of my life in a way. So it's not like one particular incident where I realised it would be good to engage a bit of wisdom thinking, and this helped me out, and I carried on being a good Buddhist. So it's going to be more broadly in terms of periods of my life and how I've had to sort of work through them. What else was I going to say? So, just to give you a little bit of pre-warning. I came across this phrase a while ago. I don't know where it was from, and I'm probably going to say it incorrectly if someone knows the correct phrase. It was something like, a Zen monk's life is a series of continuous mistakes. And I just found that teaching sort of really went in. Because as I was saying in the first talk, Bhante talks about seeing into the true nature of reality, seeing things as they are, not as they appear to be. And if we're not seeing things as they are, and we're seeing them as they appear to be, we're not sort of seeing them, so to speak, with right view or with sort of wisdom. So that means we've got a lot of work to do to try and move towards, for example, the Five Spiritual Faculties being a definite, engaged set of forces in our life. So I'm going to be talking about how I've tried to do that. Some of it's a bit messy, I'll just let you know. So yeah, that's the sort of pre-warning. Okay, I've also just sort of found it very helpful myself in the past when I've just sort of seen order members working explicitly in different areas of their lives. I've always found that sort of very, very impressive and helpful, even if it's looked very messy or discordant. I've just found it very, very sort of helpful. And I'll just mention a little something that I mentioned in the team meeting. So I'd asked for, or this was in about 1998, I had asked for ordination. So I'd requested ordination in the Triratna Buddhist Order, or the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order as it was then. And I really knew I wanted to sort of deepen my practice in this context, but I just wasn't sure that I was going to be able to do it with the shape that I was. I wasn't confident that I was going to be able to do it. I suppose there was sort of self-doubt there. But then I met an order member called Sahaja, and I remember exactly where it was. He'd come to give a talk about some of the artwork he does, and I got a good dose of him that night, and I was also cooking for the community, and he was there, and we ended up having a really good chat, and I was showing him what I'd done on my fine art degree, and we just really got on. But Sahaja's got some real energy to him, and he's quite, I don't know, I've only met him once, I don't know how to describe him without it sounding, but I just thought, I just met this wonderful order member who just seemed quite off the wall, I'll say. He seemed quite off the wall, but it was, and quite sort of crazy from my perspective, but in a really, really good way and an incredibly authentic way. And I just thought, I'm going to be all right, because I saw this guy and I thought, he's off the wall, but he's so clearly an order member, in the same way that, Abhayakirti and Vimalaprabha, who were with him that night, were. There was no difference. He was absolutely and utterly an order member in a very sort of full-blooded way. And he gave me so much confidence. From that day, I just thought, I'm going to be all right. If this is what it can look like, I'll be fine. Okay, so you have to bear with my notes. They've gone a bit jumbled in part. Yeah, so number 4 is on the back of number 1. That's a good start. So I'll start with Virya, Okay. So what's a Virya story? Let's have a look. Forgot. Oh, this was it. So this is about the year 2000. So I was working in one of the Buddhist, what we call team-based right livelihoods, which is basically Buddhist businesses. And we used to run these shops called the Evolution gift shops, where you'd have a Buddhist team working together. And at that time, I lived in the men's community and worked in the shop, and it was quite a sort of full-on lifestyle. If you lived in the community, you had to work in the shop, and vice versa. So you were sort of living and working together. It was quite sort of full-on. It was absolutely great, though. It was very good. But at one point, I became the manager of this gift shop. You can tell what's going to happen here, can't you? So I became the... So I'm a bit warm. I'm going to take this off. So I became the manager of this gift shop. And let me just sort this out.
You look more like a manager now.
Just on the outside. So I became the manager of this gift shop, and I really wasn't confident that I was going to be able to do the work, partly because, by nature I'm quite disorganised, and you could say a bit scatty or something like that. And but I really wanted to take responsibility. I wanted to step in. I wanted to sort of, I think Abaya Kirti had asked me, I think it'd be good if you became the manager. So I sort of said, yes, sir, I think I'll do that, and just sort of went ahead. But I didn't have the natural skills, really, which were basic organisational skills and, logistical skills and an overview of what's coming in, what stock have we been selling, what are the big sellers, the rota, staffing. I mean, that's just all sorts of other things. And we were coming up to the Christmas period, which is a really heavy period, which starts around September. The shops just start getting busy around September. Because I was anxious, I thought, I'm just going to work really hard and I'm just going to go for it. So I ended up not taking days off because I had this ridiculous thing of, I better go and check the shop and stuff. And then, we get through Christmas, and then the horror of all horrors, which is when you're working in shops, is you then get the January sales, which always absolutely did my head in. I was like, okay, we've got through Christmas, and it's like, oh my gosh, they want more. And it's you've got to put the January sales. It was pretty horrendous. Anyway, excuse me. Due to this sort of lack of confidence, like I say, there was a period for about 6 weeks where I didn't take a day off. And I had this sort of, a sort of youthful arrogance that, well, I'll just kind of keep going and it'll be all right. And basically, I just completely burnt myself out. I got to a point in, it's probably late January or mid-January, I can't remember when. And I said to Abaya Kirti, I said, I think I need a few days off. Can I have maybe 4 or 5 days off? So he said, yeah. And I thought I'll go back to my folks because I needed to get out of Nottingham as well. I never went back to the shop after that. I did not go back. That was the end of it. And basically, I hit a period of fatigue that lasted a while, and my energy levels didn't get back to where they had been, so to speak. Well, they actually changed, but it took about 3 years before I sort of got back to where my energy felt balanced, and I wasn't getting very tired very quickly from sort of exerting myself. Weirdly enough, I was still engaging in the band very well, which sort of tells me something. I didn't have any lack of energy for the band, which I'll talk about in a bit. So I just learned a really valuable lesson there in terms of, this wasn't virya, by the way. This was anxiety-driven sort of foolishness. But I have learned a very good lesson in terms of virya, in terms of that I need to look after myself. I haven't got just absolutely sort of indispensable amounts of energy. And yeah, I need to sort of, trust my sort of energy levels and this whole thing, sort of, your awareness of your body and so on. So that was a really good but very strong and possibly unnecessary sort of lesson. I could have kind of maybe learned that in a slightly easier way. But that was certainly, in terms of Virya, a way that it was really quite a sort of teaching in a way. And on the whole, I found, when I was trying to talk about these 5 in my life, I found Virya the most difficult one to talk about. And I don't know why, because I feel I've got a fair bit of it, but for some reason, just couldn't quite put my finger on, where it is or what it sort of looks like. But I think it's in the area for me of a definite ongoing sense of purpose, and it's definitely linked with sort of faith, this quality of, just keeping going, and this sense that Sadhananda was mentioning about these qualities of Virya, sort of not turning back. And there's one where it's Virya feels like putting on armour in a very sort of positive way. So I definitely sort of feel all those actually in my life. Yeah. So that's just a little bit on Virya. So next up we have meditation. So I'm actually going to talk, I promise I will talk about meditation. I'm not going to be talking about it much, but it comes to meditation in the end, because I'm talking in a way about integrating or gathering the dispersed qualities of of my sort of psyche, and how that's affected meditation practice in particular. So I've always been, I certainly had quite a sense of being quite split in my sort of psyche, or in my kind of psychological makeup. And there were these two, and this must have sort of grown from, I suppose, childhood. I don't know where it quite started from, but there were these two qualities in my psyche where, excuse me, one was like the good Buddhist, and one was the sort of artist, basically. So, the good Buddhist was on the whole trying to practice Buddhism, engaging with the community and with Triratna. The artist was generally found in, particularly in the band and in the different bands that I was in, and in music. And the qualities of the two were, the artist on the whole was very sort of chaotic and very, certainly back then, quite turbulent and quite strong energy, which would sometimes get me sort of into various constellations of mischief, basically. And the Buddhist was, this genuine desire to deepen my Buddhist practice, and a real sense of feeling that this absolutely was the most important thing in my life, was to practice Buddhism. But yeah, so it was quite split though, and an example would be Monday night I would have community night in the community. Tuesday night I would be rehearsing with the band. Wednesday night would be Sangha night. Thursday night mitra study. Friday night rehearsing with the band, or would be gigging, or would be recording, and similar sort of over the weekend there might be sort of band activities or Sangha activities. So there were two quite different aspects going on, and they just weren't really meeting. And I remember one point I was out with the band. I didn't tend to drink too much or actually do drugs too much. A few forays into there, which I'll talk about a bit later. But I remember one time we were out with the band, and I'd had a few drinks, and it didn't take much for me to get a bit drunk. But I remember coming back to the community, and it's got this long stairwell going up past the 2 floors of the Buddhist Centre, and my room's at the top. And I was drunk, basically, and I was staggering up the stairway, and the stairwell was sort of going on, and I just kept thinking, please don't meet Vimala Prabhu on the stairway, please don't. And I was just hoping Vimala Prabhu wasn't going to come out and see me in this kind of like completely sort of drunken state. So, and obviously all this had quite effect on my meditation practice. Just that I just couldn't seem to sort of settle in meditation. It was just quite difficult to find a quality of engagement and creativity, and so its quality being sort of absorbed in the present experience, and and with the mindfulness and metta, it was generally a little bit of a struggle. It was a little bit of a struggle. And I suppose it's because I was living two full-on lifestyles. I was living a full-on Triratna engaged lifestyle. I'd requested ordination, and going to all the retreats to train for ordination, and very engaged with the Sangha, and very engaged with this garage punk band that was doing very well. And we were doing a lot. We were doing gigs a lot around the country, and particularly in Nottingham and London, and there were these two really sort of different lifestyles, and the two lifestyles weren't meeting very much. And like I say, that was happening in my psyche. There wasn't much room for the garage punk band in the Buddhist community, and there wasn't much room for the Buddhist community in the garage punk band in a way. But that was my mind was bringing that. That was sort of my mind. And I remember there was one point where we were in the recording studio, and I was listening to a song by this artist J Mascis and the Fog, and there's this song called More Light. And I remember I was sort of struggling at the time, and I remember just listening to this song with my headphones on whilst the other guys were faffing about recording their bits. And I just had this, I used to just love this song. It would completely transport me. And it was very basic. It went on about 10 minutes. It was just verse, chorus, very heavy guitars, lots of background effects, and this swelling momentum of music, and a sort of swarm of kind of chaos rising. Also, the tempo of the song slightly speeds up. You can hear the drummer on his ride cymbal, and every so often you just hear him speeding it up a little bit. You hear this it just is getting a bit, and he used to just like absolutely every time I'd listen to it, and the vocals were sort of hidden underneath this sort of wall of noise, like someone trying to communicate amongst chaos and managing to do that. And I was so absorbed in the song, and I just knew then, I thought Buddhism cannot reach this quality absorption that I have right now. That was what I sort of felt absolutely. The energy and engagement that I was experiencing, what seemed to be in my whole being, which wasn't, it was actually a part of my whole being, just wasn't sort of speaking to me really. So what happened then was I hit some real difficulty. Basically, I don't know whether to say what happened or not, but I'm gonna not. But my mum got in some real trouble, and she had a really bad time, and she got really ill. And I was in the house when this happened, and that just tipped me into some real difficulty. It tipped me into some real trauma for quite a while, and quite explicitly, because my mum was quite ill for a period sort of after this. And I remember having this image of this sort of black hole appearing, and I felt I was just holding on to the edge of it. And I thought, if I keep on attempting to practice the Dharma, it means I've got to continue trying to be integrated and honest and face my experience. And I cannot face that because it will finish me. And that was what I sort of felt really sort of vividly. And I left the Triratna community. I left the Buddhist community, I left the Buddhist centre, and I just thought, that's it, I can't do it. And at this time I was also going out a bit more with the band to try and sort of deal with this stuff, unconsciously, but, a few more drugs thrown in there and a bit more drinking. Not an awful lot, but there was certainly a period where I was doing way too much ecstasy, which was never helpful. And that wasn't for that long, though. But yeah, that was pretty hellish. But so I went away and I had no intention of coming back. There wasn't a sort of I'll try and sort things out. There was just this chaos has taken over me. If I go back there, that's going to kill me. I can't do that. So I just threw myself into the band, and I threw myself into a very sort of, in a way, sort of chaotic period. And at this point, this was when the band, it formed into another band, which is the one that Sadhanandi was referencing, which I wasn't as excited about as I was with the garage punk band. It formed into this other band, and unfortunately the garage punk band fell by the wayside, which is something I still sort of regret, actually. So I left Triratna, no intention of coming back, and got into a fair bit of chaos. But I sort of didn't realise at the time, because I ended up coming back, which was never the plan. But I always knew that I had what was most important in my life. It was as if I had this great diamond in my life, which was the Buddhist centre and Dharma practice and sort of what we call going for refuge. Felt I had that, and it felt that I got jolted so much. But it felt that wasn't enough at the centre of my heart. It was kind of here. And I was trying to pull it to the centre previously. But then I got jolted with stuff that happened and qualities of my own mind. And I just sort of dropped it, let go of it. Because the state I was in, I wasn't stable enough to kind of keep hold of the diamond. So I let go of it. And it sort of rolled off and away. But I didn't sort of realise that, looking back at my artwork in this period, I didn't realise I was actually working on these very strong shadow elements. A lot of my artwork was images of angels falling, and there's another image of this sort of slightly scruffy drawing of this image of an angel wheeling another angel who's collapsed in a wheelbarrow, kind of staggering along like this. And there were lots of images of very energetic, wild, quite sort of dangerous sort of female figures as well were sort of coming into some of the artwork I was doing, which is, I'm sure, to do with my mum and what happened there. Anyway, I eventually returned. There was a few factors that helped me return. I mean, one of them was I met in this chaotic period. That was when I met my now partner, Kusala Devi. And she was a friend of, I was living with me and the singer were living together, and his girlfriend was, she had a friend called Lucy, who then became Kusala Devi. And so she became a very sort of stable influence, which really sort of helped me basically in that period. It was, she was a sort of grounding kind of quality, in a way sort of that I sort of needed at the time. And from that, and I suppose some other things, I started very tentatively coming back to picking my Dharma books back up. And I was so afraid because all my Dharma books were wrapped up in this box and taped up. I didn't want to get rid of them because I knew that I treasured them, but it's almost like it was a treasure that the world I was in had, that currency didn't work. So, oh, good, don't worry. So, anyway, I remember opening this box, and what I was so afraid of, because I felt I wanted to come back to it, I was so afraid of opening it and going, no, it not mean anything. But it did. It's like it was. I was started with Sanghas, what is the Dharma, and it did, and it just came in again. And after a while, I decided to leave the band. And we were sort of on tour in Europe at the time, and the guys didn't know, and I just remember, just knowing that, this is my last sort of tour. I had previously actually in America, in LA, tried to practice a bit of Buddhism and be in the band, and that was just hilarious. That just didn't happen. Even because I'd sometimes try and get an early night, and even if I did, I remember we were in a hotel, and I'd often share a room, or you'd sometimes be sharing a bed with so I was sharing it with the guitarist, like Dan, and he came in at 3 a.m. and just switches the TV on, and I'm like, Dan, what are you doing? He went, come on, Jez, it's not like it's your pad or anything. I was like, I'm asleep. Yeah. He sort of felt like mixing oil and water, trying to mix like the band. And So that was slightly hilarious. Anyway, I am coming to meditation. When I came back and after I re-engaged with the ordination process, and there was a point where I realised I wasn't going to get on retreat for quite a long time. So I thought, you're going to have to just get on with it and make an effort. And I know you're tired and you're working a lot, blah, blah, blah. You're just going to have to get on with it. And I felt okay about that. It wasn't like I had been in the shop where it was like, I will not take a day off. So I really engaged in terms of my personal practice and meditation. And something happened in my experience whereby basically what the experience felt like, an energy came from outside into me, picked me up by the scruff of the neck and just lifted me off the ground. That was the image, and was moving me. And that stayed with me for about 10 days. It didn't change. And I even in that period went down to Bristol and got quite drunk with a friend. And I remember thinking, I'm really quite drunk. And this energy was just still there. Like absolutely sort of, it was very sort of mysterious. And it eventually sort of settled down. And but what I perceive happened then was, and I can only say this in hindsight, is that the energy of the wilderness and the energy of the Dharma met. And it's mysterious, I don't know how, but they met and they became integrated enough, and they started talking to each other in friendly terms, recognizing each other, and decided to work together. It was nothing, it was felt like that just was happening. I wasn't thinking, well, I need to integrate these energies, because I was drunk. Thank you so much. I was very drunk at the time. Right, you can phone me. But since after that, my Dharma practice, because there was no more band, because I'd quit the band and I'd stopped that. But what happened then was, and this experience happened mainly in meditation, but also very vividly outside it. And since then, there was a definite shift in my meditation practice, and the whole of the rest of my life actually. There was, because I'm sure any ordinary will say the same. Your meditation practice is your life. What sort of happens in meditation, vividly feeds the rest of your day, and for me, the sort of landscapes that appear in meditation also, the so to speak inner landscapes definitely feed my engagement in my sort of, I suppose, what you call myth and sort of symbolism of my everyday sort of life. I hope that doesn't sound too confusing. Okay. But yeah, absolutely. Sort of since then, I've found it quite easy to. Oh, there it is. Sorry, I thought I'd lost it. I was winging it for a moment. I don't know if you noticed. Oh no, I've said it all. Oh, so that's a little bit here. So yeah, I definitely find now, and have done, really since then, and increasingly so, that just that. I'm just saying what I've just said. That the perspective that I have in meditation practice is definitely relating, and I think that's again this sort of quality of previously the two parts of my experience when my mind weren't talking to other, and then they did, and they do basically in all areas of my life. That there is a wholesome sort of communication. It's funny though, I still feel this split. I still feel this, but it's not a split. I'm just aware of these qualities of sort of, this sort of chaotic sort of quality in my experience, and this definite engagement with the three jewels that's very vivid. But it all feels to be in the same place now. And it's also, just to say a little bit more, it's definitely in the area of it's sort of image and meditation practice on the sort of a few different bodhisattvas that I've taken since ordination that order members will meditate on, and so my main meditation practice is a figure of Vajrapani, who's this sort of blue. It's actually I actually took the peaceful practice at ordination, but then a year after took the wrathful form of that, and again that was so that's this great big sort of muscly blue figure. He's kind of wreathed in flames, and it sort of symbolises kind of breaking through and the sort of this very dynamic quality of the enlightened mind. So it's sort of images like that have been very, very allowed me to sort of engage these different energies very vividly, and some other sort of images as well, which I've probably not really got time to go into. Okie dokie, finally got on to a bit of meditation. Okay, so faith. So in a way, I've always found it easy to be in contact with faith and inspiration. It's never been sort of too far away from my experience. On the whole, I've never really felt to be sort of lacking in faith or inspiration or a sort of desire to practice. Certainly, well, even before the sort of period of leave, so to speak. So that's been on the whole quite straightforward. But I just want to give you an example of when it got a bit imbalanced. What's the word? Imbalanced. So it got a bit imbalanced at one point. Well, it had been for a long time. You might not be surprised to hear. So like I say, I moved into the community when I was in 1998 or the end of 97. I can't quite remember when it was. Asked for ordination in 98. And, eventually got ordained in 2008. Quite quickly became the men's MIT convener, then moved to the men's ordination team at Pavmaloka. And I always had this sense of, I really identified in a way with being a sort of Triratna institutions sort of man, as in just going to stay in the institutions. It works for me. That's what I want to do, and I'm just going to keep doing it. It's working. I'm just going to keep doing it. But the difficulty was, I also thought this is probably this is the best way to do it, and from that I thought this is the only way to do it. So what would happen is I'd sometimes see, I suppose for me, being on the men's side of the movement more in terms of ordination training and Pavmaloka, and was that if I saw like order members that I thought they're solid order members, they're really stable, they know their stuff, they're clearly going for refuge, you can feel it, and then some of these order members, they were living in community, working in team-based right livelihoods or retreat centres or whatever it was, and then they would step back from those conditions and go and live with their partners. And I would always be horrified by this, like really, really like, oh my God, it was like the most heinous crimes. Like, you've got so much to offer and you've given up and you've got it. Like, that was what I would feel, honestly. It'd be like so sort of disappointed. I'm exaggerating slightly. I'd just be bemused. I'd be like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? It's like, this is working. But then what happened? You could probably just, probably don't need to tell you anymore about what happened. Let me just make sure I know where I am in the Bing Bong Bong. That was it. I found myself in 2019 wanting to leave Paraga and move in with Kusala Devi. So the thing was, my heart was really clear about that. There was no kind of like, my heart had just made a decision in ways it had done previously. And I've often felt with my heart that it feels like, this isn't me bigging myself up at all. It was just, again, an image that came in. With my heart sometimes, it feels like there's a sort of group of people that are sort of camping in the wilderness. For some reason, it's always Native American Indians, but there's a shaman who is the leader of the camp. So they all come together, and he's a sort of leader, and he just leaves it with this sort of natural, spiritual sort of depth. Some days, the little tribe would wake up and find that, and the images of a snow-covered little landscape, they've woken up, the shaman's gone, and there's these footsteps leading out into the forest, and they go, oh, he's done it again. And all they can do is pack their bags and follow these damn footsteps. And it feels like that happens with my heart. Sometimes my heart will just go, you know what? And we'll just be somewhere else. I mean, it doesn't happen a lot. It's not like suddenly decide to want to leave the retreat or anything like that. It's changes in my life. But that's partly, again, this possibly slightly unintegrated quality of my mind where things change quite vividly and quickly. So this happened. I just thought, I want to live with Kusala Devi. But I was, there was a confusion. It was like I was so confident in 3 jewels, and it felt like, I'd ended up at Padmaloka, and I had such faith in hold on, let me say the word. Yeah, I suppose I'd really associated my faith overly with the conditions that I found myself in. So I'd overly associated with living at Padmaloka, with being in the institutions, and I hadn't had the wisdom here to think this might be provisional, this way of doing it. I always just thought it is this way. And even when I saw other people regularly changing their conditions, I didn't sort of then even have the wisdom to go, oh, it changes, doesn't it? And people decide to do different things. And that doesn't mean they're not going for refuge. That doesn't mean that they've given up. That doesn't mean that they're a loser, as I sort of probably thought. So it was... So there was this sort of lack of wisdom in there. And of course, it bit me on the backside pretty heavily by the fact that it just sort of took me a long time to sort of even come to terms with the fact that I was living with my partner. It was kind of, I knew I had to do it, but it took a while to reconcile that in the rest of my sort of psyche in a way. So yeah, whatever approach, I just have to remember whatever approach I'm taking, it is provisional in a way. I'll just finish off in the faith aspect in terms of, in a way currently. I think at the moment my faith particularly expresses itself in terms of engaging with the order, with my personal practice, but it's also particularly in terms of engaging with people who are coming to the Buddhist centre, or people that I'm in a particular relationship, or certainly people that I've ordained or have asked me to ordain them. So that's a very vivid part of my practice, and it's a confidence in the 3 jewels that, as I've been able to do it, so others can do it. And there's a real vivid engagement in sort of other people's lives, and the wish to sort of support others and help them translate the 3 jewels, in their life, which feels sort of a very important part of faith, really, for me. Okay, so I've got 2 more bits. I'll try and sort of get on with it a bit. Time's getting on. So I'm going to talk about mindfulness. More heavy stuff coming up. So one area I've really had to work with in mindfulness is my physical health. So I've got type 1 diabetes, which I've had for 46 years now. I got it when I was 5 years old. And yeah, I've just had to just in terms of the very day-to-day, the very mindfulness of the day-to-day management of, which of course anyone who's trying to look after their diabetes has to do. They have to apply a level of awareness to, what you're eating, when you're eating, insulin levels, how to keep yourself healthy. And it's a condition, it's a chronic condition that if you don't look after it, well, you can really sort of end up in a bit of trouble. And so you've got to, it's best to try and keep as best you can sort of on top of it to the extent that you can. But I remember from a young age, my folks were trying to help by sort of telling me what would happen if I didn't look after it. So they would sort of list that you could go blind, you might have a heart attack, your kidneys will pack in. But the one that really used to crunch my heart was that you'll get nerve damage and you might have one of your feet amputated. So that for me, this idea of getting a foot infection and having to have one of my feet amputated was absolute horror, like really so sort of frightening. And I developed quite an amount of sort of fear, and I just a lot of fear around it, and sort of would try and look after my diabetes in such a way to really keep away, quite a fearful way to keep away any of these symptoms sort of happening. So something changed a bit though last year. So I also noticed that I have got some nerve damage, and I feel it in my left foot. I can feel it a touch in my right. It's not huge, but I've been getting in the past 7 years the beginnings of sort of subtle change in the sort of nervy experiences. Most of the time I can't feel it and it's fine. Last night when I knelt to do the offering, you can get pain which feels like needles or your foot's in a vice. It's very painful, but then it's fine and it's not... and it's quite natural having diabetes this long for that to sort of happen. I've got a friend in Sheffield who is the same, and he has the sort of similar thing going on. Anyway, I'd had all this sort of struggle, and I suppose a bit of trauma around this. And, you tell someone you're diabetic, and if they're not very well, they go, oh, my aunt's diabetic. She should have both her legs chopped off. And so many times I've heard that, and I'm just like, yeah, it would, because it would just go in. Mention of that would just really sort of, I suppose, traumatise me. And so last year, I was struggling with my diabetes a little bit, and cutting a long story short, decided to get some counselling. There was this free counselling service that they offered in Nottingham. Diabetic counselling it was, which was great. It was on the NHS, and they've got a really good not a diabetic sort of setup at the medical centre in Nottingham. So I went there. So I go to this place called Dundee House at the City Hospital. So I walk in, and there's a queue of one man in front of me. He's got his leg all bandaged up. This is a diabetic. He's got his leg all bandaged up in this big plastic sort of thing. And I'm immediately thinking, oh my gosh. And someone comes in behind me, and yes, I turn and I go, yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's someone behind me. I go into the waiting room, and there's a poor lady with half a foot. And I'm just like sat there thinking, this is kind of comical and this is horrendous. It's like I've come for some counselling, and all I'm seeing is sort of people presenting in the worst way I can feel is imaginable for a diabetic. I'm just like, so I had about 3 sessions before I couldn't I couldn't like going anymore. The sessions are really good, and that wasn't the reason I went. But there was something about, I think, seeing that so vividly over a few weeks, I just thought, I think I had to bring this sort of quality in, this, mindfulness that I'm doing as much as I can. I'm doing what I can. I've done what I can. I don't want to berate myself for when I get into difficulty, because it's a very difficult condition to manage. And that's coming from 46 years of trying to manage it. So I've just had this real mindfulness of, just really trying to accept that. And just trying to bear the stress mindfully in the moment, trying not to get into any anxious stories when I'm feeling my foot being a bit twitchy. So I've had to really bring in mindfulness in the present moment quite vividly to work with. It's okay, you're doing what you can. And also a bit deeper than that, in terms of being in the wisdom aspect, there's some element of, this is a human body, and this is what happens to the body. This is conditioned co-production. This is what's going to happen. It's okay. Just that, like, it's okay. This is what's going to happen. Just trying to bring in this sort of mindfulness awareness of, the human body. I've also brought in over the years just a real sense of gratitude that I've got an illness, but I'm completely active. It doesn't actually limit me, and I genuinely feel a lot of gratitude for that. There's been a bit of a hidden teaching in my life, and I remember Satyaraju at Padmaloka, a very good friend of mine, saying Paraga, how did he say it? Let me not get it wrong. Paraga, this might be the greatest gift you've ever been given. And in a way, I was a bit shocked by that. But at the same time, I kind of thought, he's right in a way. Because there's a possibility that had I not had it and had that stress factor in my life, I might not have come to the Dharma. I don't know, just some perspectives that I sort of brought on it. Okay, I've got one more thing, then we're done. So that was faith. So I've got now, we'll finish with wisdom. So I'll talk about my job here. So I work in a big substance use service in Nottingham City Centre called the Nottingham Recovery Network. And in there, it's got loads of places for people struggling with addiction, with sort of drugs or alcohol. And it's a fantastic building. It's the best place I've sort of worked, and they do so much. And you can hear me okay, Claire? Yeah, great. They do so much, but I work at the sort of hard end of that building, which is the rough sleepers drug and alcohol treatment team. So we work with the team was set up because you'd have people coming in for appointments who were using heroin and crack cocaine and other things, but particularly if they're using heroin, there's a huge risk of death by overdose. It's very, very risky, smoking, particularly injecting heroin. So you get people in for appointments to try and get them onto methadone prescriptions, so methadone is an opiate-based medicine that reduces the amount of heroin someone needs to use. And it reduces, so instead of getting these ups of the heroin, taking someone up and then they're having to come down and they're needing to get money to get more heroin, and then they're up again. So it sort of compresses that, basically. So you've got more of a wave. And so that's the methadone part of it. But if you say to someone who's rough sleeping or who's really homeless and is really chaotic, okay, Dave, come in next Thursday at 1:45 to see one of the medics, that's not going to happen. And they found out it wasn't happening. Some of these guys and girls are in such horrendous situations. They literally are in a sort of hell realms. And they So to expect them to turn up at a meeting in a week or 2 weeks' time is, or even sometimes in an hour's time, is just asking way too much. So this team was set up to go on outreach out into the city, to make connections with these people and to try and either bring the treatment to them or build enough relationship with them if they weren't keen on the treatment come to them, to get them to come to the Wellbeing Hub and access some of the treatment that was happening there. So a lot of these individuals have got, very strong histories of crazy sort of trauma and difficulty in their lives from very sort of early on. And a lot of the way they end up trying to negotiate that difficulty is because they have not got other ways of negotiating it. It's not like, should I meditate? Should I kind of pick up a dog? You've got none of that. It's block it out. Block these horrendous memories out of abuse and all sorts of things. Just block it out. So that's why you get people from a very young age. It's usually it can be as young as 11, but it's usually mid-late teens. People start realising they need to block these experiences out, and they'll continue to do that because the trauma is so much, and they aren't understandably aren't able to find a lot of the time more productive ways of sort of working with that. So we sort of work with them to try and engage with them as much as possible. And the way we do it is we've got to build what we call a therapeutic relationship. So I've got like 18 clients on my caseload, and I've got to build what I call a therapeutic relationship with them, whereby they trust me enough, they can communicate with me enough, they can share their what they need to share with me, and in a way that has to happen so that you can then be the gateway to the Wellbeing Hub, and you can also be the gateway to either a detox where they become completely detoxed off the substances, or hopefully into rehab where they go to a different part of the country for, it might be up to a couple of years, and engage in full residential rehab. Then they'll often sort of stay there as well, because when they come back to the place where they were using a lot, they can tend to get into old habits. So you're that gateway. So you've got to really build a relationship with very, very chaotic people. And so what's needed is quite a lot of trust in them and empathy towards them. And I was going to say patience, but it's our patience doesn't come into it, because when you're dealing with someone who's so chaotic, it's not like, I need to be more patient. It's like you're just keeping that door open. And it's not a case of you want to shut it and you got to be patient, because your job, you just keep the door open. When they're ready, they'll come in. And with some of them, it's like, I had one of the ladies on my case, and her engagement was very sporadic. I remember her coming in once and to try and get on a methadone prescription, and I hadn't seen her for a while. And I got a very good relationship with her, and because you have to have with all of them, even the most difficult ones, you've got to get a good relationship with them, and you usually always do. You always do. But so she came in. We did everything. We did the drug screen. We had a good old chat about what we needed to do. She was seen by one of the prescribers. Quite a long appointment for them, maybe like 3/4 of an hour. So the prescriber goes up to get the consultant who's going to sign the methadone prescription. So we're waiting a bit, maybe like 5 minutes. I just go to see, and the consultant's having his lunch. So I came back down and I said, look, he's just having his lunch. It's going to be 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. And she went, okay. And I said to her, don't go, because I know that she goes. And she went, no, I won't. And I came back within that 10 minutes. I said, are you okay? He's going. And she went, I'm just going to nip to Tesco's. And I was like, don't nip to Tesco's. And she said, and it literally was 50 yards up the road. She said, I'm just going. I said, we're nearly done. You've nearly got the prescription. Just wait. She said, look, it's only up the road. So I thought, I'm not going to argue. So I thought, okay, I'll see you in a minute. She's gone. She came in 2 weeks ago and I hadn't seen her in a year. The last time I saw her was a year back. I'm nearly finished, but I'm just going to tell you about a couple more clients and then how I work with them in terms of the sort of wisdom approach. I've got a guy he's up. It's been so difficult to get him housed, like really, really difficult. He's very chaotic. He can be quite difficult, anger issues. I finally sort of get him housed somewhere. He does really badly in the hostel, but we managed to keep him in there. And then he buys this electric scooter and he leaves it in the reception area. And then night staff, when the day staff have gone off, let someone in who doesn't live there. So they make a real mistake. The guy they've let in goes up, grabs his scooter and goes, "See you later, guy," and just walks out with it. So a complete mistake by the staff. And then my man comes in. He's told by the rest of the hostel who's done this, and there's so many ridiculous rumours going around the homeless community. It's absolutely crazy. So they're told so-and-so did it. So he goes up to so-and-so, punches him in the face, and gets kicked out of the hostel. And he's still homeless. And he's also got a dog, which means it's really difficult to house him because there's only one place that accepts dogs and they don't want him. So, again, and I go out to see him and just he's on a methadone script, try and keep him in treatment and stuff. I'll just mention one more. I've got one guy, this is a success story. He's going to residential rehab in a few weeks. So I've done a lot of work with him. I was supposed to actually discharge him from my caseload about a year ago. I hope my boss isn't listening to this talk. I doubt she is. But I didn't want to because I could see there was something sort of in him and I had a very good relationship with him. And I finally got him to the point where in a few weeks he's going to do a detox in Nottingham. I'll pick him up from his detox and drive him straight up from Nottingham to Cumbria, where he'll go into residential detox and he's really up for it. There's been a change in his mind and his approach and his view. So that, that's a bit of a success story. Just to finish off, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the, so to speak, wisdom aspects. I'm going on a bit too long, I apologise. I suppose it's just seeing the potential in the people that I'm supporting, not their potential in terms of could they become a Dharma practitioner. It's just their potential, and that potential lies in the fact that they are subject to conditions as we all are, and they can engage with some conditions that can help them. And as long as they can hope, more importantly themselves, connect with the fact that there's some things that they can do which will make a difference. And so that's the potential in them, is the fact that, you know that they're subject to conditions and they can be supported to engage with some conditions which will improve their life. And just it's also, just the vision of sort of humanity. You just see that people have just got so much potential. So, whether it's people who are rough sleeping and taking drugs or someone or order members, with this, it's the ordinary wisdom that that my clients need. They don't need a Dharma book. They don't need a meditation class. They need to manage their substance misuse so they don't die. They need housing. They need stability. They need hopefully to engage with a more positive group of peers. And I've had two of them say the same thing. They said, "You know what I want? I just want a flat. I just want my own place. And I want to sit on the sofa." They said, "I want to sit on the sofa with a fag and watch telly." And it's like, you just know that, it's such a simple thing, but and that we sort of take for granted. And it's just, and I suppose, you're trying to sort of move them towards that with all the sort of, complexity that they've got in their lives. And, So you just, in a way, you're just trying to help them get to slowly towards a survivable human state. That's the wisdom. And it reminds me of that, in the teaching of the wheel of life, and in that teaching, you've got these 6 realms of different realms of conditioned beings. And the Buddha comes with different things in each of those realms. So he doesn't bring a Dharma book to those that are in the hell realm. He brings something that will just like alleviate that suffering. And I suppose that, that's what we're trying to do. Yeah. Okay, where am I at? So yeah, I mean, the wisdom practice, and particularly in work, they need to be shown kindness. Any hint of impatience, and you've screwed it. Like really, so you've got to be so kind, like genuinely kind, and that kindness is taking an interest in them. It's not like, it's taking an interest in their lives and trying to help them to connect with any values that they have in their lives, however sort of remote those have, because they've all got them. And the guys where it's like, I just want a flat and a telly and a fag and a sofa and a coffee. That is a value. That expresses they want some safety. Awful people will talk about they want their family back, all these sort of things. So you're trying to get them in touch with that. And the wisdom of, like I say, appropriate action is like, what do these people need right now? What is it that they need, and where can I signpost them to? Or where can I, how can I respond right now appropriately? What does this person need right now in terms of this communication, or in terms of something sort of bigger? Yeah. And I don't see, sometimes in the movement, when I say I do this kind of work, people often say, oh, that's really bodhisattva work, and it's like going into the hell realms. I really don't see it like that, and I'm not trying to be all clever. I just don't, because there's about 130 people work in the whole Not in Recovery network. I mean, there's only like 12 of us on our team, but they're not all bodhisattvas. They're human beings responding. So when I think someone says it's very bodhisattva work, I don't feel it is. It's responding to human beings and trying to help where you can. Which, okay, technically that's bodhisattva work, but it's sort of it's just responding. It's just responding, really. Okay, bish bosh, there you go, no more heaviness. So, I mean, that was just a bit of an overview of, like I say, sort of broad chunks of my life. And I think, just sort of, I don't know, it just slightly brings me back to this thing of a Zen monk's life is one sort of a series of continuous mistakes. I don't feel my life is a series of continuous mistakes, just to be clear. But there's something about how to work, and this is maybe what you can be thinking about. How do you work with the 5 spiritual faculties? Because I suppose I've spoken about a life, the reality of life meeting the teaching of the 5 spiritual faculties. And it's like, what does that look like so that you've got an effective life, so you've got a meaningful life? And even if you don't sort of want to pursue Buddhism, it's like you can still use that framework and the qualities of that to help your life. You don't have to be like, okay, you don't, they're also going to be seen as qualities. But I suppose the thing is, in our lives, how can we engage these 5 faculties in such a way that we're improving our lives, that we're more aware of others, that we're more aware of in ourselves and others, where sort of true happiness lies, and where we can live our lives as fully as possible. Okay, thank you very much.